Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining this session. We are going to talk about the challenges and rewards of building 0 to 1 platform products. I'm Madhumita Mantri, product lead at Startree, which is an early stage startup in B2B building data products in Bay Area. I'm very passionate about this field in general. Like I'm trying to learn a lot about challenges and rewards of building 0 to 1 products. And platform is something very special to me and core to me. As part of our company, we are also building platform products. And I came across Nitin's this LinkedIn learning course, which was very valuable to me, and I was excited about the course. I thought I'll get in touch with Nitin and discuss about this learning and also his journey and experience about challenges and rewards of building 0 to 1 platform products. So with that, I'll kick off the session. Few logistics. So I have few questions. I'll quickly run by those with Nitin, and then I'll open up the floor for Amy. And you can raise your hand, and I will invite you to the stage, and you can directly ask questions to Nitin. Without further ado, welcome Nitin. Thanks again. You've been a great mentor to me so far, and I give a lot of credits to you for my growth in product management in general. Love to hear your introduction and something not on your LinkedIn profile.
Sure. Thanks so much for hosting and for having me. It's a great honor to be part of this. My name is Nitin. I'm a product lead in LinkedIn Marketing Solutions, responsible for our advertiser and developer experience. Really excited to have the conversation. And something not on my LinkedIn profile, I used to run a bulletin board system in the early 1990s where people would call my house and connect, and we would, talk to each other and build community and play games with each other and whatnot. So that was very fun.
Thank you for a nice introduction and the fun fact about yourself. So without further ado, I'll dive into my first question for you. A lot of people are curious about knowing what is a platform product and how does it differ from non-platform product. If you can share some examples, that'll be really helpful.
Sure. So I think of traditional product management, whether is typically focused on one user, one use case, and a consumer experience. So, for example, I am, I don't know what to call it. Like I'm sending an email, or I have an email client, or I have an editor, a word editor, or something like where I am just one user and I'm interacting with one single experience. Whereas platforms I think of as underlying capabilities to have multiple products and multiple experiences built on top of it. So, for example, I have an API that multiple different companies can plug into my API and understand the reporting and the analytics. So it's not just about one single use case, it's about multiple of use cases.
Yeah, absolutely. I think API evolution is coming out very strong, and API driven development, I see that picking up quite fast. Even at our company, we do a lot like thinking about API first, then UI. Earlier, it was very much UI driven and then deciding API. So it's interesting how it is evolving the space, and would love to know what are some of the key considerations and unique challenges you are experiencing to build platform products from 0 to 1 especially, and how they differ from iterating on existing like non-platform products.
Yeah. So I think some of the key challenges with platform products is that they need to handle, as I was saying earlier, multiple use cases. Another challenge with building 0 to 1 platform products is that it can be quite expensive sometimes to platformize upfront before you know what the use cases are going to be. So I think this is best to understand as an example. I think I think another challenge with the platform products is that it's going to require thinking through a lot of the depth of the different use cases up front. So you can't always know or anticipate. So with traditional consumer product, you might be able to build something, test it, iterate quicker and quicker. But in a platform lens, if you're iterating, then you're potentially breaking all the partners who have integrated with your previous version. So these are some of the challenges. I think the idea of how do I build is, I think, a key consideration when building out a platform is, do I need a platform or not? So I think it's risky to platformize too early before you have incredible use cases that you're going to build on top of it. So I think like one risk of is actually platformizing too quickly. No platform is going to be as valuable as it could be without killer use cases built on top of that platform and where you can see those use cases getting used. So I was going to go with an example. So we built for example, we recently launched a business manager, which is this tool that is able to allow multiple ad accounts, multiple pages to all be on top of this one container. So we can manage permissions and look at reporting on top of that. I think we knew that by definition, it was going to have multiple entities that are going to be built into it up front. So we decided to build it in a platformized way right in the beginning, whereas there are other examples where maybe when I was at my startup and we were building an ads management system for B2B marketers, we did not want to platformize too soon, and we decided not to. And I think that was the right choice in that context.
That's a great thing you brought up, like premature platformization or like scaling in general will be difficult. So I know that sometimes we know this solution is going to solve multiple use cases, and probably it's right direction to start thinking about platform. However, like as you said, there are multiple use cases can be served. In order to prove ourselves, do you recommend first focusing on one or two use cases to do really well before going after other use cases, or in the validation phase, you recommend that we should validate all the use cases?
In general, it depends on the strategy. I don't think there's a one size fits all approach to innovation, invention, or creation. And so I think there are scenarios where acting fast and not thinking about platformizing makes the most sense. When I think it's called GitLab is one of these companies. They've published publicly about their details, how they operate, and iterative development is really, really key. I've seen other scenarios where I mentioned before in the business manager example where we really thought through all the details, the strategy up front, where it's going to go long term, all the different use cases that we could envision that we're going to build on it. And we kind of measured, and then cut. But I don't think that that's the only approach. I've seen other approaches. So again, I don't think it's one size fits all. If platform is your strategy, like I think OpenAI is classic, and I think Sam Altman has discussed this, where he gave all this advice to Y Combinator companies about iterate, go fast, talk to users, launch quickly, and then he spent 3, 4, 5 years to build out a AI platform before even knowing what the use cases would be. And I think he's even mentioned publicly, like, he's a bit regretful of some of the advice that he gave. So I think my personal take is there's no one size fits all, but it depends on the company and the context.
Interesting. Yeah, you mentioned about measure. How do you measure the impact of a platform product in the wider ecosystem, and how do you know like we're on right track?
I think it's very challenging. I think when you have like consumer products, growth products, when you have a high volume, You're able to measure, A/B test, how many people made it through this funnel, or how many sessions, or active users did we drive or improve? How much engagement did we improve? With consumer and high volume of interactions, it's easier to measure that impact.
Yeah.
For some platform projects, like let's say you're building a new permissioning system, or you're migrating to some new front end or some new back end infra or something, you're not able to do an A/B test. You might have to ramp it in a way that it ramps to everyone all at once. You won't be able to do the A/B test. What I have done and has been useful as a proxy is trying to understand adoption. So is the platform getting utilized by its consumers? If you monetize, then revenue, how much revenue is coming into the system is a proxy for how much value there is. Sometimes platforms will help improve the productivity or efficiency of developers. You can do surveys on developer productivity, or how long did it take to develop this, before and after. You can also run causal studies. So if you're not able to directly do an experiment or an A/B test, then and you build out some new capability, you see how many people adopted it 6 months, 3 months, 6 months later, then you can kind of look back and see what was the predicted, say, revenue that we would have expected. And now that those users and customers are using this platform, how much revenue we see now. And you can partner with your data scientists or use tooling to try to run causal studies to see cause and effect relationships between your platform investments and the impact. But I would say this is all more challenging with platform products than it is typically with typical consumer products.
Absolutely. And thanks for sharing those tips how to measure the impact, especially in this challenging space. One quick follow-up to that. So it's if you have a good set of users who are using your platform, then at least you know whom to go out, reach out to, and then ask for validation or look at their behavior and self-evaluate those things. However, if I'm working on a very early stage platform, in that case, I don't have like a bunch of users to go after. What would be the best way to measure impact? Is it like qualitative survey or any other means you can suggest?
If you don't have users, I think what comes to mind to me is do you have product market fit? And if you don't have product market fit and it's a very small volume of users, I would talk to the customers. I mean, qualitative, sure, you can do surveys, but I remember again when I was at the startup and we were starting something brand new, the first 50 customers, the first 100 customers even, I mean, I knew everyone. I literally knew the people using the system. I knew how they were measuring success of our product. So if you're a sales team or account management team, maybe again, I know the advertising domain, they were looking at our volume of leads or the cost per lead. So even though my product didn't have, the ability to measure, I could see what we were delivering on behalf of those customers. I would suggest anytime you are selling anything to a customer, that customer is evaluating you based on something. What is that? Are they looking for happiness? Are they looking for productivity? Are they looking for, lead generation? Are they looking for new, hiring velocity? Are they looking for developer velocity? The customer is measuring you on something as the product owner. And so if you only have 5 customers, 10 customers, even 30 or 50, you're actually able to go so deep with those customers that you would be able to deeply understand how are they evaluating you, and then that can become what you measure and what you drive against yourself, even if you're not able to do A/B testing or experimentation.
Sounds great. That's really helpful. Thanks for sharing your perspective, especially product market fit. I think that's an interesting thing that everyone probably should start thinking. I will open up the floor for questions, but before that, I just wanted to ask one last question. I have a couple of more, but I'll wait for that. I'm really curious about this question. In general, how do you balance the need to innovate with the need to keep your product stable and reliable, especially it's quite challenging in platforms. So any piece of advice over there?
Again, I think I keep coming back to today this idea of context. If you I don't know, if you're running like banking software, you're doing something in finance or billing, then the stability, reliability, testing, retest, that comes front and foremost versus if you're working on some, let's say some building on top of OpenAI, some generative AI thing, and you say, hey, I anticipate that this could be, these responses might hallucinate or they might not go, as you expect, then that could be an area where maybe you can be able to move faster and test and iterate and as you go. Mm-hmm. I think in general, I think of principles for your product. So if you have principles around trustworthiness, around stability, around reliability, and those become your guardrails, then you want to go as fast as you can within the principles that are appropriate for your context. Mm-hmm. And those principles might depend on your specific context. That would be my initial response.
Great. One quick follow-up to that is how much percentage of say resource or investment you would invest in there?
For innovation versus stability? Mm-hmm. It depends on the context. I think a traditional thing I've seen published online is this idea of 70%, investment in the core, 20% strategic, 10% for venture bets. Venture bets being the, unpredictable. You don't know if it's going to go well or not. And, the 20 strategic is like what's going to become core in the future. The 70% core, I would say core would be uptime, stability, reliability. Mm-hmm. So that's, but it depends. The reason I say it depends on the context is like, if it's wartime and your company needs to act fast, focus on the core, fewer things done better, doesn't want to be, then it might make sense to be 95% on the core versus if it's like we're hitting plateaus, we need to be understanding what the next frontier is, we need to make a big leap, we need to be running a lot of experiments, it's some big technical disruption and we don't know how it's going to go, you might want to shift the other way where you're doing a lot more innovation and speculative because you're trying to discover what that next big horizon is. So I think just understand why you're making those investments and I would say, you're going to have some portfolio and just be deliberate and intentional about why you're deciding that that's a portfolio mix that makes the most sense for you.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for sharing those tips. I'm sure this will be useful for anyone who's trying to plan for their platform products, since it is like Q4 nearing by. I see Tim has raised his hands. Tim, I've invited you to the stage. You can unmute yourself and ask your question. Are you able to hear us?
Oh, we lost him.
He just messaged me on LinkedIn. Maybe he is trying to enable his audio, but I can ask his question. The question that he sent to me is, what often do you discover entirely new use cases in an emergent way? And does that happen? How do you cope with it? Or do you culture it or discourage it?
Okay. As long as there is mutual value, both value to the user and value to you as the platform owner, I highly, highly encourage it. I think one of the most magical things about platforms is once you build that horizontal capability, you can't always predict all the use cases that people are going to use it. Now, it's important to have guardrails and understand the use cases, to study them, to make sure that, you're not exposing data that you shouldn't have, and you're not accidentally, creating competitors, people who might be competitive with you when you're not intending to do that, and whatnot. But I think one of the magical parts about platforms is trying to find undiscovered, use cases that you did not initially think about. And again, I come back to that business managers that, we have discovered new reporting use cases, new internal use cases, new billing use cases that we had not originally conceived of when we made the investment and built the strategy. And to me, one of the powers of strong platforms is kind of the leverage of creating net new value with that same underlying infrastructure. So I think in general, I would encourage it. Just make sure that it's within the bounds and expectations of the organization.
Thanks. I think that's great. I mean, especially the recommendation to go after it instead of not taking risk. I think that's very useful. I have opened up the floor for asking any questions. So anyone in the audience, you have questions, you can raise your hand and I can invite you to your stage. Okay. I see Srinivas, I have invited you to the stage. You can unmute yourself and ask question.
Yeah, so one question is, let's say there is a existing product which is with a huge amount of audience, and then what exactly it takes to roll out the new feature, and then how much percentage of investment that we need to make everybody to avail that product, avail that feature, because when we are building a feature, it is going to be competitive to the new trend.
So what's your question? Could you help me understand a little better?
So let's say there is a product and we are rolling out a new feature of the product to the customer, huge audience. And then because it will be a competitive, very competitive feature to the market, how much percentage of investment that we need to invest in to make sure all the users are going to utilize that feature?
Yeah, so I what I'm hearing is like you're building a new feature, you think it's gonna be great, but you also need to drive adoption. So how much should you be investing to be driving adoption of those existing features?
Yeah,
Is that the
yes.
So the way I think about creating value in general in the product management realm is like you're creating new features. That's what you and I, what you just talked about, or you're kind of maximizing the value out of the features that you've already built. I actually think that's a little bit about how I might think of a growth team versus a feature team. And then I think the next question is how much to invest in that growth team, which is trying to maximize the growth of your existing features, or getting new users in, making them successful. I think it depends on what ideally users would be able to come in and just through the normal flows learn how to use them and get value and start adopting it. But if they need extra sort of support along the way, what comes to mind to me is how much benefit do the users get from using that feature. So if we know, for example, adopting this feature will drive incremental revenue impact of this much, and we know that ABC sets of investments would help drive adoption from X to Y, you could almost like do a calculation of being like, wow, if we could drive that much adoption, we would be, I'm just making up the number, we could be driving $50 million more of incremental revenue. I should be willing to invest a big, large amount in order to drive that amount of adoption. Now, on the other hand, if it's like that driving that adoption, we don't know how much it helps the users, and we don't know how much value that will create. And there's a lot of hurdles and challenges, and it's a big investment. I mean, I would question why we built that feature in the first place, if but also would have when I think about designing the product orgs and product teams, like what are those key customer value or member value metrics that are most important to you? They want to like get through a flow very quickly or with minimal drop off, or they want to drive this number of results, or they want to, reduce those number of support tickets, and then put the product teams assigned to that customer value metric. And sometimes adoption can be a okay proxy for their getting value, but I don't love adoption. I usually like something closer to something that the customer would actually value versus just the adoption. Now driving the adoption would be in service of driving that bigger thing that the customer actually values, and then trying to quantify, how much investment you want to do to drive that customer value metric. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, when we look at the LinkedIn, say I'm active user, right? So let's say LinkedIn came out with a feature, right, which is having huge customer base, and that which is very useful for each and every customer in terms of marketing, in terms of doing all this stuff. But the training of that particular feature is more needed, right? And then in those areas, the quantification, if we'd like to drill through what it could be.
Yeah, so I'm not going to talk anything specific about LinkedIn, but in general, I would assign teams to drive customer value or member value, and then try to understand the relationship between driving the customer value and then the business value. So that can inform, and then when building out these teams, decide what dimension of customer value I want to be driving, what targets I want to be, driving, and who is credible and trustworthy, and being able to drive that type of impact.
Thanks, Nitin. Srinivas, we have one more hand raised. So
Yeah, that's it. I'm done. Thank you so much for John.
thank you.
Yeah.
So Saurabh, I'm going to unmute yourself. Sorry, I'm inviting you to the stage. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey Madhumita, hey Nitin, how are you guys doing today?
Great, thank you. Thanks for coming out
Great.
and listening.
Yep.
Yeah, it's all. I got this thing update from Madhumita's connection. Since she's a first connection of mine, I saw that audio event. I was like, okay, she's bringing somebody from LinkedIn who's like prime working on the product management side. So this was a very interesting audio event. Yeah. Thank you for hosting this, Madhumita. Yeah. So my question was related to the Llama 2 release, which Meta AI came out with. And I actually wanted to ask you, how useful is Llama 2 in building like platform products powered by Gen AI and ML? So what are your thoughts on that, Nitin?
Yeah, this is not not my wheelhouse personally. So I'm not it's like I'm not working on it right now, but in general, I think that having multiple models makes sense in general. I can see the benefits of open source in general. I think the cost to run these large language models is quite high, and there's going to be innovations from all over, sorts of vendors that are going to be driving that cost down, and there's going to be a demand on GPUs over the next X number of years to, so I think it's going to be a mix of software, bringing the costs down, and hardware trying to increase the capabilities of these vendors. But like in terms of like specifically commenting on like Llama 2 versus other models, it's just like outside of my wheelhouse.
Thank you, Nathan. Thanks for the clarity. Appreciate it.
Of course, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Saurabh. Hope that answers your question. So if you're done, you can mute yourself. I hear a little background sound. Thank you. Anyone else have questions can raise your hand. Otherwise, I have few questions. I can go over that. Seems like no other hands. Oh, there's one. Okay. Go ahead, Shreya. Unmute yourself and ask your question. Are you able to unmute yourself? Okay, it seems like there is audio challenges. Anyone else? Oh, I see her again. Shreya, can you unmute yourself and ask your question if you are not able to? Okay, go ahead.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. My name is Shreya. I'm a senior PM in Amazon. Thanks, Madhumita and Nitin. This is very informational. So I have a quick question to Nitin. So when we're building API, would you consider that under a SaaS model or a platform as a service or a software as a service model? And how would you differentiate that if you have one use case that you want to offer to multiple teams and like obviously varying given the varying endpoints?
Okay. So what I'm hearing is you have an API product and you're trying to determine how to price it. Like, should you do SaaS, or maybe you could do like some usage-based sort of like, and right now you have one use case that's going to multiple teams. You're trying to determine like what the pricing should be. Is that a summary of the question?
It's the theme is right. It's not question for pricing in particular, but if you want to value differentiation is what I'm asking about.
Yeah.
How would you like place it, like the position it?
How to position the value if there's only one use case?
Yes. And would you position it as a SaaS software as a service model or the platform as a service model?
Okay. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by platform as a service. Can you share more on that?
So something that you would offer for a development to build on versus the software as a service, or the way you build the API and you provide it to different, let's say that it's an internet product, you provide it to different teams for them to use it.
Okay. I might need to go a little bit deeper on yours but I'll just share sort of initial reactions, but
Sure.
Sorry if this goes a little bit off. In general, in terms of pricing, I think it is something that the way that I would think about it is, what is the value that I am adding to the consumers of what I am building? So this could be a platform, it could be anything else. So are we able to quantify that incremental value? So if I'm driving some speed, if I'm driving some efficiency, if I'm driving some cost savings, if I'm driving something that's, entertainment that they're willing to value at some amount, what is that value? And like in general for pricing, I would think about, how do I capture an appropriate percentage of that value that I am adding? I think to capture for my own business. In general, I think I've seen SaaS-based models, like let's say you're selling customer service software, and it is, you think, oh, I'm going to do SaaS-based, and it's going to be based on the number of seats. So, oh, we have this many seats, and then charge based on those number of seats. There can be challenges on that, because what if the software is driving so much, it starts leveraging AI, it starts driving a tremendous amount of efficiency and productivity, that maybe the number of seats needed in this organization could be less. So I think that's the risk of how, thinking about this SaaS or seat-based types of pricing models. I think usage-based is another one that I've seen comes to mind and seems to make sense. I think it's always really hard to know how much value you are actually adding. You can run surveys, willingness to pay studies, and whatnot. And in terms of like building an API versus a platform as a service, if it's one use case or it's multiple use cases, I mean, this goes a little bit, and I think I'd have to just understand it more than I understand it today. But what I've seen some organizations do is make sure you have your awesome A++ use case really well defined. You have your case studies, you have your, go to market, and you can create offerings there, and then try to figure out, hey, what's the next adjacent vertical where I can add a lot of value, or what's the next adjacent one, what's the next adjacent one. So you can kind of build up the offerings and the suite of offerings from there. And those are kind of like some initial set of thoughts. Sorry if I totally missed the question you're asking, but hopefully there's something valuable there.
No, you've answered majority of them. So I was going towards the usage-based model that you alluded to. So I think you've answered most of them. But thanks so much. I don't think this short time is enough to answer my question, anyways. But this was really helpful. Thank you.
For anyone here, anyone listening, I mean, feel free to send me LinkedIn messages too, and I can be happy to help asynchronously as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Shreya, hopefully you got your answer. Nitin, quick question to you. How much time you have? Should we wrap up, or you can take one more question?
I think we had 10 more minutes, I believe.
Yeah,
Roughly.
nine minutes, roughly.
Yeah, I'm ready to keep going.
Okay, great. Thank you. I see Majaz has a raised hand, so Majaz, go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question.
You have to invite him up.
I have
There you go.
invited.
Okay.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hello.
Hi, Madhumita. Hi, Nitin. Thank you so much for having this event. I really like this topic, the challenge and rewards of building 0 to 1 platform products. My question is, as you know, that one of the biggest challenge in product development while building the product from 0 to 1 is dealing with uncertainty and ambiguity. As you know, that we may not have enough information or data about the customer needs. So my question and my concern is what we can do in that particular situation if we don't have enough data or customer needs all those stuffs, what we can do in that situation.
Yeah. I hear you. I think if I am building a product for a segment, one thing that I have in mind for myself is like, I want to become an expert in that customer or that customer segment. And I have found personally, like talking to roughly 30-ish customers, and you can start to learn pretty quickly. So this idea of like, hey, I don't have enough data about the customer need, like I think of it as deep customer understanding and deep technical understanding. So I wouldn't talk to the customers being like, what should I build? I would talk to customers, sit with them, observe them, go to their environment, see how they do work, have them demo, have them give their lay of the land, their products, how are they measuring success, how are their managers looking, what are their OKRs. I almost think of like product management, like trying to understand the customer almost better than they know themselves, especially when you bring the mix of those multiple customer perspectives and then you combine that with technical understanding. I'll even read books. Like I work with marketers right now, and I when I first started working in B2B marketing, I probably read 5-10 books about marketing and B2B, the book, like what are all the trade pods, all the newsletters, all the thought leadership pieces. And even though I've been working in the industry 10 years, like even right now, most recently, I'm like 2 to 3 books in on like 30-year-old marketing books, like to really understand what and then through that deep customer understanding, that deep technical understanding, I think I can probably be in the best position to invent on behalf of those customers. So I think this idea of I totally get there's uncertainty, there's ambiguity, there's often not enough data, sometimes quantitative data if you have your tracking your measurement, but qualitative, like through a mix of surveys, through a mix of talking to customers, user research, immersing yourself in customer experience, reading everything you can. I would want to know that for anyone I'm building with, and obviously there'll still be uncertainty and ambiguity, but then it's like, what is the biggest risk area? What's the biggest challenge? What's the biggest, run a pre-mortem and see what's the biggest unknown, and then what's the cheapest, lowest cost way to de-risk that part of the experience or that part of the build or that part of the project. And that and then sometimes these things don't work out. It's really, really hard. And so knowing that you did the best you can, and then you learned if it didn't work out. And I think one of the hard parts about platform products in general is sometimes they take so long to build, but then even takes that much longer to measure. Just today, I think, for something we built 4 years ago, I was like doing a retro on the value, what value did we promise? And then how much value did we actually deliver versus what we promised, and to hold ourselves accountable and to be as objective, intellectually honest as possible. Like sometimes these projects are so big, but it took so much harder to do the go-to-market, to drive the adoption, to do this, do that. We promised this in the platform, but this is what might have actually been delivered. And to take that hard look of like, yeah, feedback loop is slower, but you still want to learn and be willing to say like, yeah, that investment did not make sense. I own that. And this is the learning, so that next time we can be smarter as an organization about what we're building.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nitin. Thank you so much. I appreciate this.
Of course.
Bajaj, hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you so much.
We can take one more question. Anyone else in the audience wanted to chime in? Okay, I don't see any raised hands yet. Feel free to raise your hand and I'll invite you to the stage. So while, okay, there's one more person, Abraham. Okay, I invited you to the stage. You can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Inti. So my question is more about when you are in the earliest stage of building your platform product, and of course, probably you have still lots of use case and feature that is not covered out of the box from your platform. And when you go out and talk to your user, you're kind of not convinced to start adapting your platform. So the option that you end up having is like, should I double down and bring my platform to a maturity level that they can start using it, or they will be more willing to adopt it? Or I should start with some minimum group of users that I can start use even that unmature platform and start maturing it from there. Like, what are some of the tactics or techniques basically to bring on board those users who are not convinced still that your platform is serving them?
Yeah, that's a hard question. Great question. Most of my experience the last 10 years has been now at bigger tech companies, but I think the way when I used to work at startups and work at smaller businesses, and the ones I even talked to today, the way I think about is like, when you're smaller, you're kind of in a journey of trying to understand you're trying to build out your differentiation. So what is it that that's actually Peter Thiel's famous question from 0 to 1. It's like, what do you believe that few other people believe? Or what do you know? What is your insight? I've written about this in my product strategy approach article. What is your unique insight, your unique approach, your unique differentiation? What do you do better than anyone else? And how do you invest very, very deeply into your differentiation where it becomes so compelling that people like want to adopt it, and they get so that is what I would think about. And then the way I would think about, do I wait and just build feature 2, 3, 4 and then launch? Or do I try to launch with feature 1, which is, but I'm only going to get early adopters? There is risk with launching too early. So I think the risk that comes to mind is kind of overfitting, your solution to that early set of customers versus building something that like a large market would benefit from. At the same time, I think the con of not launching sooner is learning. I think research and learning is so much about product management, and the benefit of launching sooner rather than later is the benefit of learning in real world environments, which is the best way to learn. So I'm not saying it's not one size fits all, but I have a bias towards launching. If you can get 5, 10 users who will work with you and get excited and give you feedback, and then if you really, really try to be selective and focus on your unique differentiation and build that up, then hopefully that becomes so compelling that larger and larger swaths of customers are interested.
Okay. Abraham, hope that answers
great.
your question.
Thank you.
We are at time. So Nitin, any final thoughts in terms of concluding? We talked a lot about challenges, but if somebody is aspiring to build 0 to 1 platform products, what will be your advice in terms of rewards? And we can close with that.
Yeah, no, I mean, this was a great conversation, incredible questions. And I think, I guess closing words, I think the things that come to mind is, a platform is only as good as its most killer use case. Before ChatGPT exploded in November 22, I think that technology was available in their dev portal for like 2 years, literally 2 years.
Yeah.
It's kind of unbelievable that to me is like they built out the platform, but they hadn't shown the killer A++ use case that was built on top of it. So I think if you're building that platform, just immersing yourself in those incredible, awesome use cases that are getting built on top, and almost like making sure that those use cases are working. I think trying to build it in a way, don't go too early, but once you realize, hey, multiple use cases can be built on top of this same underlying capability, then the power of like encouraging that, using that, finding net new innovation that you might not have discovered. And I think the other thing that comes to mind is like pricing it appropriately. So how to really understand the value you're driving and making sure that's solid, differentiated value, and then capturing the appropriate amount of that, for your business.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for sharing all these valuable tips. Definitely helped us to understand the challenges, but it's also very rewarding and great learning. So thanks again. And if anyone would like to reach out to you, will they reach out to you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn is definitely the best.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for speaking at this session. It was really valuable, I'm sure, to me and the folks who are listening. And thanks, audience, also making it very interactive and staying through the session. So with that, we conclude, and you all feel free to drop off.
Thank you so much for hosting. Thank you.
you.
Thanks to everyone for listening and all your time.